Here's the thing about biology and biologists. Biologists like to classify things into nice little boxes or kingdoms, as you'll find out later. And they like to organize things based on a hierarchy. And that is what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about the biological organization of life. And we're going to start with the smallest part, and we're going to work all the way up until we get to everything outside and on planet Earth. So I hope you enjoy this lesson about the biological levels of life. So let's get into our biological levels of organization notes here. As you can see, these biological systems are made up of many different levels. These levels relate to one another. One builds from the other, and all life stems from these levels. And we start all the way down at the very bottom with the cell. The cell is the most basic unit of life. Now, please remember, I said of life. Are there anything smaller than cells? Sure, there are. There are many things that are smaller than cells. There are the things that are inside the cells, which are known as the organelles. There are things like biomolecules, and there are even atoms that have even smaller things like electrons, protons, and neutrons in them. Now, we're going to start with these atoms, and I'm going to introduce you to my good friend, Mr. Adam Maddox. This is Mr. Maddox. Mr. Maddox, can you tell me about an atom?
Never trust an atom. They make up everything. Truly, every piece of matter is made up of atoms. They're the basic building block of all matter. An atom is not living, but atoms can combine to make molecules, and molecules can be part of living things. But atoms are inanimate. They are the basic building block, and we put them together, we form molecules, and those molecules combine and they start to form systems, tissues, systems, these kinds of things. You can follow that hierarchy of complexity as you move through a living organism.
All right, that's my good friend, Mr. Maddox. He teaches, and he is a chemistry teacher. Thanks for that info, Mr. Maddox. So we start with the atom, which is the basic building block of all matter. When atoms join together, they form molecules. Those molecules then can end up forming things like the cell. The cell is your basic unit of life. Here are some examples of single-celled organisms. So we have a Blepharisma, which is a type of protist. Let's take a look at this Euglena. It is a single-celled organism. It does all the things that all living things do, except it is one cell. It also is part plant and part animal. It's got chlorophyll like a plant, but it moves around like an animal. Pretty unique organism. And we have what's known as a stentor. Another single-celled organism doing all the functions of life, but it's only one cell big. These three different protists are some of my favorite organisms to look at underneath the microscope, and they are all single-celled organisms. They all perform all the functions of life that you wrote down already, or you have notes on. They have to live in water, or they need water. They get rid of gases. They breathe. They reproduce. All those things that all living things do, these things do it, and they are only one cell big. Now, when cells get together and they pile on top of one another, like this, they form what is known as tissues. This is a picture of what happens when you just try to Google tissue and you're looking for biology tissue. This is the kind of tissue I'm looking for. Tissues make up your skin. They make up all of your different organs inside. So those tissues had to form first before they could form all of these other organs. Let me show you an example of some tissue with this simple little experiment. Okay, it's time for a simple experiment. You can do this one at home if you have all the tools. So here's what you're going to do at first. We're going to prove that I'm made of cells. So here's what you need. You need a toothpick. You need a cheek. And you need to take a scraping of your cheek. Not so far that you pierce your face with a toothpick and all of a sudden you're making bad choices and possibly being a goth from now on. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to scrape my cheek. All right. I think I have some cells on there. I'm going to take some water. I'm going to rub my cheek cells onto the slide that I'm preparing here. This is what's known as a wet mount slide. I'm going to take a cover slip and I'm going to place this cover slip. Oh, 1 second. I need to stain my cells because the cells are going to be pretty clear. I want to see them. So if I stain them, and this will, it will be absorbed by the protein of the cells, I then can put that on there. I'm going to slide this into my microscope and get a picture of my cells. This is what I saw underneath the microscope. These are examples of my cheek cells. All those little individual little boxes that you see there, that is an individual cell. Inside those cells, you can see the nucleus. That's the purple stuff that I put on there, got absorbed, and inside the nucleus, there's a lot of protein, so those nuclei are very dark purple. Another example of tissue is some cardiac tissue. This would be some tissue or the cells that you would see kind of around your heart. Now, I did not do a simple experiment to show you my heart tissue, so you're going to have to trust me on this one. Now we're going to move into from the cell to the tissue and now into the organs. You're very familiar with all of your organs. Here they are right here. Things like your lungs, your liver, your spleen, stomach, kidneys, all of these are parts of your organs, or all of your organs that you have. However, not all organisms have these same organs. For example, a jellyfish doesn't have eyes, a nose, a brain even. Look at this unique creature. This is what's known as a planaria. A planaria is a type of worm that you can see those kind of eyes there. Those are how it senses light. This is such a unique creature. It moves around, and if you cut it in half, it will regrow the other half. If you cut the top of it off, it'll regrow its head with a nervous system and a brain. If you cut it in half, it'll regrow the bottom of it. Also, plants all have organs, all the different parts of the plant that you see there. The stem, the leaf, the roots. Those are all different organs of different organisms. Once we move from organs, a group of organs that work together form what's known as an organ system. Those systems can be found here on this slide. You have different systems that make you up. All of you have these different systems. Your circulatory system for your blood, respiratory to breathe. Skeletal system keeps you upright and walking with your muscular system. All of these systems work together. And there's more systems than what you see in just this slide. Plants have systems. When all of these things like the stem, the leaves, all the buds work together, they form the shoot system. And you can see the root system down below. So all organisms have organ systems that work together. When those organ systems work together, they form the organism. They form, that's right, you. Or they form my organism that I'm going to be talking about for the rest of this lesson, the beautiful, the gorgeous emu. That's right, this is my organism, and I'm going to pick the emu as we walk through the rest of these systems. But let's not forget, not only do we have animals as organisms, we have things like down in the bottom left-hand corner, archaea. That's a type of bacteria. Top right-hand corner, that's another form of bacteria. You've got your mushrooms or your fungi. You've got your protists down there in the bottom right-hand corner. Lots of different organisms in protists. They are kind of a catch-all. Scientists didn't know where to put some of these organisms, so they created a new kingdom for the protists. And then we have the plant kingdom as well. The kingdoms we'll talk about a little bit later on in upcoming lessons. Once we move on from the organisms, we move into what is a population. Populations, if you take one organism and you have many of those organisms, remember organisms reproduce, they can have others, then you get a bunch of emus, for example, together forming a population. All the same organism. When those populations live with other living organisms, they form a community. Now, in the community, we are only talking about the other living organisms, what's known as biotic or living factors. So the other things that are living with my emu, there may be bacteria or archaea, other animals, other plants, fungi or protists. For example, let's take a look at the biotic factors that make up the community for my emu. We have the koala, which lives in Australia with the emu. Don't forget about the kangaroo. We also have one of Australia's most deadly plants, one of Australia's most deadly mushrooms, and one of Australia's most deadly spiders, because everything in Australia is dangerous. All of these things living together make up the community. Now, what happens when you have and you bring in things that aren't living into the community? That's when you start forming the ecosystem. The ecosystem has biotic, and now we've got a new word, abiotic factors, or non-living inside that system. So let's take a look at my Australian ecosystem. Not only are there plants there, and I'm sure there's other living organisms, maybe in the sand or out there in the plains living, but we have non-living things such as the sand or the water in that organism, rocks. All of those living and non-living make up the ecosystem. From the ecosystem, we're going to move into what is known as a biome. A biome is a type of ecosystem, and the world may have multiple of these ecosystems in the area. So for example, Australia has lots of desert, lots of different desert. They also have the Great Barrier Reef, which is a type of biome. You can see there in the bottom right-hand corner, there's Ayers Rock. It's a very famous landform there in Australia. All of the organisms living, all the living organisms and the abiotic factors make up these biomes, and when you put all the biomes together, you get what's known as the biosphere. Together, all the biomes together on planet Earth make up your biosphere.